Do you believe in magic? I do. I even have a shirt that says I believe in magic. But I'm just a big kid. Just ask anybody that knows me. But you know, when little kids have birthday parties and they want that pony there? Do you remember seeing that sense of wonderment in their eyes and the magic it brought? To me, it always makes me smile. Now, in today's episode, Amelia Perrin of the American Wild Horse Conservation joins me. Here's a few tidbits. Surprisingly, many people don't even know that here in the U.S., we have approximately 75,000 wild horses and burros running free. Now, I think that's pretty cool, don't you? Now think this. Think old Western movies. Think John Wayne. Now, aren't they really the symbol of the great American West, these wild horses and burros? Now, here's something pretty crazy. Currently, the government has them labeled as feral. Now, we're going to get into that. Me, they're just wild. Feral is just a government label that, frankly, is just not true. And did you know that these wild, did you catch that, horses and burros actually help the ecosystem? Did you know that they're being pushed around and punished because of the cattle industry and the big money behind it? Now, if you're anything just like me, get ready. Bring your little kid self back because the wonderment and magic are all tied up in this episode. And yes, I am smiling right now just thinking about it. We are supported by PrepVet, providing stem cell therapy for pets.
As a pet lover, did you know your pet can benefit from the incredible healing power of stem cell therapy? Prep Therapy offers a groundbreaking solution taken right from your pet's own blood. Say goodbye to joint pain, arthritis, kidney and liver conditions, and more. They'll experience faster recovery, increased vitality, and extended quality of life without the need for surgery or harmful drugs. Put the wag back in their tail and discover Prep Therapy today at PrepVet.com. Save 10% with promo code FurRealPodcast, covered by most pet insurance.
For real, 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 for real. Got a bunch of furry friends and I love them all the same. I'm an animal lover, veterinarian is the name. Let's share some pet stories from heartwarming to strange. Losses and gains, from wacky to insane. For real. You're now tuned in to For Real with your host, Mark Kyle.
Hey, everybody, and welcome back to the For Real podcast. This is an episode I've been trying to do for a while. And I got to tell you, the more I started watching videos and that, I was so excited to do this thing. And I've got a great guest on right now, Amelia Perrin. She's with American Wild Horse Conservation. Amelia, I'm going to apologize before we start because I'm going to have so many questions because I'm just really excited to have you on.
I am so excited to be here. Thank you so much for giving us this opportunity.
Well, I know you're busy. I know you're bouncing all over the place, but again, thanks so much. But let's start off. Let's talk about your background, how you got involved with this, and then we'll just go from there.
Yeah, absolutely. So I am a true horse girl at heart. I've been riding since I was 5 years old. And then I've also been a wild horse advocate since I was that age. I remember when I was super little, I used to have lemonade stands, raising money for wild horses. And I was just so in love with the idea of this wildness, this idea of this freedom, this idea of this little corner of the West where these magnificent animals still run free. And that little passion evolved, I'm so lucky to say, into my career. I'm so grateful to be here. And I now, my whole day is horses and wild horses, and I could not be happier.
That dream job. So where were you when you were growing up so little to actually know about all that stuff?
Well, I was originally from California, but mostly grew up in North Carolina. And I luckily had a mom who was very animal welfare focused. And she got me, I like to say I got her involved in the wild horse issue, but she really fostered my love for animals and my love for advocacy.
So if you're in North Carolina, the wild horses in the Outer Banks?
Yeah, we would go see the OBX horses, the Kerala horses, and all of that. But I was really just enamored with the Western wild horses.
Well, you know, as I was watching all the videos, like I said when I started, I mean, it's unbelievable. But it is a symbol of the American West.
Absolutely.
You know, that's the craziest thing about it.
It really is, and they embody everything that, our country values, this freedom, this family, this just ability to run free uninhibited by ropes or anything, they're just it's an incredible thing, and it's a very special thing that we have on our Western public lands that not a lot of people know about.
Well, that's the thing I was going to address too. Is like I mentioned before we got on, is talking to a friend of mine. It's surprising how many people don't even realize that there's wild horses.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially, on the East Coast or in the central states, a lot of people just really don't know, and that's really sad because these are our wild horses. They're on our public lands. You can go see them, and everyone should go see them. It is a completely life-changing experience.
Well, the thing, and again, and correct me because again, when I'm reading about stuff, it's the internet, so you never know what's right or wrong. But one of the things, I mean, it may have been, I can't remember what, but it's the world's first horses came from America.
Yes. Yeah, so, the wild horse evolved on the North American continent, and, they crossed the Bering Land Bridge, and then when eventually the Bering Land Bridge, went away, they resided in Asia, where they flourished, and they were domesticated, and then spread across Europe, and then when settlers came to America, they actually were bringing back the horses back to their native lands and their lands. So there's a lot of really great science showing the genetic connection between the modern horse and the horse that evolved in the North American continent, and it's really cool. So this is the birthplace of the American horse, or of the horse, and it's a really special thing that we have.
Yeah, yeah, I didn't know that, but just to for the listeners, the Bering Land Bridge. Can you kind of just tell everybody what? Because I've been to the Bering Sea, but some people probably won't know where that is. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So I'm not a scientist, but my understanding is
Me either.
I'm in communications, but my understanding is that it is, land that, connected the continents, and, animals were able to cross back and forth and migrate, and then I believe it was in the Ice Age that it, collapsed or sunk down, and it was no longer, a bridge between the continents, and there was no migration anymore. So that's why the Europeans brought the horses to the
Right.
Americas. They brought them back.
Yeah, because I think it kind of ended up like in Siberia or something. I'm thinking, wow, and the one place nobody ever wants to go, but the horses went back and forth between there and here.
Exactly, and they thrived. They thrived in Asia, and then they,
The Mongolians.
yeah,
Oh,
exactly.
yeah. I
Wolski's,
didn't, I didn't even think about that. That's kind of cool.
yeah.
So let's get back to you a little bit. So you grew up wanting to do this thing. Where'd you go to school? What you're doing now? Of course, I know some of this stuff because
Mhm.
we both of us have some synergy there. But
Yeah.
let's talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I'm currently a student at the University of Oregon. I'm in the journalism program. I'm getting my undergraduate in, journalism and creative writing. So I'm really taking that, opportunity that I have to go back to school to, hone my skills, bring creative ways to advocate for wild horses through communications, through writing, and through journalism. I think that storytelling is one of the most powerful motivators for change. And so I'm really grateful and really excited to kind of tie my passion for advocacy and my passion for wild horses with the skills that I'm building in school to tell their stories and to make change through those stories.
Well, let's be honest. The old Western stories were really good stories to hear anyway. So you're just going to add on to it.
Absolutely. Yeah, everyone wants to sit around a campfire and listen to old Western stories. So hoping that we can put a modern twist on that and put an advocacy twist on that and really get people to understand this issue.
Well, even though you're a duck, because for you guys listening, if you don't know that, I was a beaver, which was Oregon State, which is only about 40 miles away, which is kind of funny. It's almost really hard as a guy to admit that they were a beaver, but I tell you, I think I'd rather been a duck. Anyways.
I think everyone should rather be a duck.
Oh, here we go. Okay, so so let's get back and how you got involved. I know you were doing the lemonade stands and all that. I get that part, but you went to school for this. But how did you get into the organization and where you are today?
Yeah, so an opportunity kind of fell in my lap to be an administrative assistant. Quickly learned I am not great at administrative assistant work, but I am really good at writing. So I was able to plug in my skills in the organization as it was growing and as it was evolving. And I was able to work my way. I was the investigations manager, so I oversaw AWHC's Freedom of Information Act program, our investigation into the adoption and incentive program, which landed a New York Times expose. And
Oh, cool.
yeah, that was
Way cool.
a pivotal moment for the issue and for me personally, it was very exciting.
Yeah, big time.
Yeah, and so, and then my love for writing just kind of drove me to where I am now, which is the senior communications manager. We've got an amazing team. The whole organization is just incredible. It's so special to work with a team of people that is just, we're united by our passion. We all love this job. We all go above and beyond, and it's a fantastic team. And I'm very, very, I'm very honored to work by them, and I'm very grateful to learn from them.
Well, one thing and I'm going to say this early, and we'll get to it at the end too. So the website is AmericanWildHorse.org, and I've spent a lot of time. They've got some amazing videos on there, and the more for anybody, for the listeners that are there, if you listen, if you watch these things, one, it's going to blow your mind, but two is they're really fascinating. If you like anything about horses, you're going to love that for sure.
Mhm.
But let's talk about wild horses now and get into the history, and then we'll get back to the organization and all the other stuff that's going on. So let's kind of dig into the horses so people understand a little bit more about that, and we'll just go from there.
Yeah, absolutely. So we have, there's an estimated population of about 73,000 wild horses left on our public lands. They roam in 10 Western states. I'm not going to name all of them, but the majority of them live in Nevada. There's some in Oregon. There's some in Utah and Wyoming.
In Montana.
In Montana, yes, yeah. And then the wild burros mostly live in Arizona. So they roam these expansive lands, and they have been here for, centuries, and just living on our public lands. And it's an incredible thing. They're protected by a 1971 law called the Wild Free Roaming Horses and Burros Act.
I know it's a lot of words to say, by the way.
It really
All
is.
the time.
Yeah, and so, this is a really incredible piece of legislation. It's one of the only acts that, specified to protect one species. The other animal that's, protected by an act like this is the bald eagle. So that shows how revered wild horses are.
Right.
It was passed unanimously by Congress and signed into law. And so America has been tied to its wild horses since the inception. And right now, what we're seeing is a complete mismanagement of these
Oh,
amazing animals.
I got I got a quick question for you and a clarification. So what I didn't mention, you've touched on a little bit, it's horses and burros, by the way, wild horses and burros. So what I read, and again, this is where you have to help me. So a burro is a donkey, but a donkey is domesticated and a burro is a wild
Yes.
donkey, basically?
Yeah, essentially. They're the same species.
Uh-huh.
The nomenclature is a little different. So we call wild donkeys burros, and then domesticated donkeys.
Yeah, I had no idea. And then what I like too is burro's actually a Spanish name.
Yes. Yes, it is.
Yeah. Oh, so see, I did some research, but I was kind of confused. I wonder if they're the same thing. I know what a mule is, but I didn't know that a burro and a donkey were the same thing. That's cool.
Yeah.
And between the two, so to get into a little bit numbers, like what I read, and correct me here, because again, I know they vary all the time. There's roughly between the two of them, some around 75,000, and there's only like 3 or 4,000 burros or something like that.
Yeah, so there's an estimated population of 73,000 wild horses and burros, and there's
Uh-huh.
about 14,000 burros now.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, yeah, and 58,000 wild horses approximately. But they roam on millions of acres of land, and so that's really a small number compared to the population or their habitat.
Well, the law you were talking about in 1971, by the way, that was Nixon, surprisingly,
Mhm.
there. But at one point, and one of the reasons it went there was because it got down, the numbers in the 60s of the wild horses went down to about 17,000.
Yeah, there's something called mustanging, which if anyone's listening has seen the Misfits, I think that's the Marilyn Monroe movie about mustangers.
Sure.
Yeah.
I remember.
Yeah, so there's something called mustanging, which was just this brutal practice of chasing wild horses with helicopters, throwing them off cliffs, and tying their legs down with tires, and then sending them to slaughter.
Mm.
So they were not protected. It was kind of a free for all for wild horses. And then one day, a woman named Wild Horse Annie saw a
I love her, by the way.
She's amazing. She's the the backbone of this whole movement. She saw a truck full of bloodied wild horses going to slaughter. She followed them. She saw what was happening to them, and she had to do something. She just had to make some change. So she started advocating for wild horses, standing up to the cattle ranchers, being and working really hard to get this law passed. She mobilized and inspired school children across the country to write in to their Congress members, asking them to pass this law and to protect wild horses. And then we got this really important Protection Act out of her advocacy.
Well, a couple things too that I read in World War One, which it was a long time ago, and you don't realize when you think about it, because growing up, we've always heard about one, two, and all the other ones, but they conscripted 1 million horses for the war that were wild horses.
Yeah, yeah. The backbone of our country really lays with the wild horse and the horse in general. Yeah.
It's crazy. I mean, when you think about it, obviously, if you use a brain, mine's pretty small, but when you use your brain, think horses in a war is crazy, but it wasn't that long ago.
No, it really wasn't. I mean, they still have horses, I think, in the military and all of that. And they've been partners for us, and they've been symbols of resilience and freedom and inspiration for poetry, for stories, for music. And then it's a real shame that we're treating them the way that we are now.
Well, you've got John Wayne and you got Mr. Ed.
Yeah,
Of
exactly.
course, there's a horse, of course, of course.
Of course, yeah.
So let's get into everything that's been going on. But I know that you guys mainly work, or is it mainly with the Nevada horses? And is that the one that's affiliated with the Nellis Air Force Base area? Is that how that works?
No, so AWHC runs the world's largest fertility control program for wild horses.
Okay.
Fertility control is the fertility control that we use is a reversible non-hormonal vaccine that started remotely, so it does not affect natural behaviors. It is not a permanent sterilant, and it really just allows wild horses to be wild. The herd that we implement this program on is in the Virginia range, right outside of Reno, and they are managed by the state. So it's a little different because they're not a federally protected herd. They live on a mixture of public or private and state land. And so we work really closely with the Nevada Department of Agriculture to administer this program, and it's been a really great success. It's it's setting the standard for wild horse conservation.
Now, how long have you guys, it's PZP is what it's called.
Yeah.
How long have you been doing that? I know that it's the biggest program that's ever been done, I think, but how long has that been going on?
So it was restarted in 2019, and that's where we've been really, since 2019, we've been really putting our efforts into making this model program. It was actually, our data was the basis for a peer-reviewed paper that just came out in Vaccines, which affirmed the viability of these kind of fertility control programs on large wild horse herds on large habitats. The Virginia range horses are about 3,500 horses on 300,000 acres of land. So they've got a big habitat to roam, and our volunteers have a big habitat to hike, but they do an amazing job to get out there and administer this vaccine.
So most of the wild horses are not just what you guys are doing, but most of the wild horses are on public land, but there is some like wildlife refuge, and then private land is kind of what I think of.
Yeah, so the majority of wild horses across the West are managed by the Bureau of Land Management. That's the federal agency tasked.
BLM, yeah.
Yeah, and then there's a couple herds that are on state land. So that's like the Virginia range horses, specifically, but the overall majority are on public lands and managed by the federal government.
So when you say state land, it's like a state park?
Yeah, it's not really a state park. Well, in the Virginia Range, it's a mixture of private and state land. So there's some park aspect of it, some lands that's just kind of owned by the state, and then private land. So we work really closely within the community to get permission to administer fertility control on their lands, to work and we really just work in the community to make sure this program works.
Now, another thing I saw that if you take all the 10 states where they are, there's roughly 27 million acres. Is that a good number?
Yeah,
Wow, that's a lot.
it's a lot, and it is a lot, and unfortunately, the wild horses have to share that land, so it's not all just for them, it's multiple use, so they have to share it, with private livestock, and they are vastly outnumbered on those lands.
Yeah, we're going to get there. I'm
Yeah,
saving that for the end because I've got a lot of questions about that.
ready.
Uh, so when I was reading that, what there's a definition of the wild horses. They're either wild or the other term that I guess the BLM uses is feral.
Yeah.
Can we get into why there's a different definition? And I know you and I are going to be on the same page on this for sure.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
let's go for the government's term of feral and versus wild.
Well, feral has no scientific basis. It
Of
purely
course.
describes a species' relationship to humans, and does not have any bearing on their nativeness, their wildness, or anything like that. It's just a descriptor word. Unfortunately, it's got a negative connotation with it, which is is unfortunate because it pigeonholes a lot of species, not just wild horses and burros, into a negative category when
Absolutely.
in fact they are benefiting their ecosystems, and are showing positive a positive benefit to where they live and the species around them and all of that. So we can get into all of that, but
Well, we are.
purely with the wild horse issue, it has no bearing. They're wild horses. It's just a way to again corner them into this negative aspect.
Well, they define it as invasive and intrusive,
Yeah.
and we're gonna get into that too because I know that doesn't make any sense to me at all. Oh, by the way, just I completely off subject. Where do I get one of those Stay Wild shirts? I want one of those shirts.
Oh my gosh, yes, I can actually, make sure one gets sent to you. That would be amazing.
Yeah, I definitely. Well, again, for you guys listeners, sorry, everybody listens. I go off topic all the time. When years ago, when my kids were really little, we actually one of our business we had was a children's clothing store, and it was called Wild Child. So it fits perfectly with my mentality, 100%.
Amazing. Yeah, those wild shirts are fantastic. They're on
Yeah,
the
I when I was looking at the videos, I go, "Hey, well, I'm getting one of those shirts. There's no doubt about it. I
yeah.
want to have one for sure." Okay, so let's get back. So there were at one point in North America is a better word. I would say America, but North America, there were millions of horses back in the day, and of course, for many reasons, there's a lot less. But it's driving me crazy that people are trying to regulate this, given the fact they're a symbol, really, of the wild, wild west. It just drives me crazy.
Absolutely, and it's so unfortunate that they are, not revered in the way that the public reveres them by our federal government. It's very sad.
Well, and we're going to get into the reason for that. I'm trying. I'm chomping at the bit to use to do that. But I so you guys, let's talk about the organization when it got started. Was it with Annie, or was it before that, or how'd that work?
No, so we've been our own 501(c)(3) for about 10 years now. Um, our organization kind of works on a few different fronts. So we've got our in the wild work, which I just talked about. That's our conservation work.
Uh-huh.
Then we've got our legislative work. So we really try to influence policy through the congressional level to enact reforms for wild horses and burros. We've got our litigation work, and that is, we file strategic litigation where we can to set the standard and set some really good precedents for wild horses and really build up this firewall of legal protection for these wild animals. And then we have our advocacy work. I think that's one of the most important ones in that, because I just work in that area. But if people don't know, people can't care.
Right.
And so we just have to talk about it and educate people and ensure that everyone knows that these are your horses. Again, you can go see them. They're on our public lands. And you are also the one paying for their demise. Your
Oh, yeah.
your tax dollars, they're funding this mismanagement. And so everyone should care. I always say, if you don't care about the animals, care about the money. If you don't care about the money, care about the animals. There's something for everyone here.
Well, one of the things is, and one of the nice vehicles of getting the information out is something like this podcast. Luckily, I was able to get you guys. But again, when we started talking is, I don't know how many people actually know that there's wild horses in the U.S. That's the craziest thing.
Exactly. Yeah, it's one of the biggest things that we're facing. And then as soon as people know, they want to take action, and they're like, wait a minute, this whole system from top down is crazy. And they want to join the wild horse conservation movement and advocate for a better future for these animals.
Well, and as you know, I'm in Texas, and for you guys that are listening, a lot of people that are friends of mine and stuff here in Texas, Willie Nelson and Annie Nelson have been Amy Nelson actually have been really big advocates. That I know Willie adopted like 80 wild horses himself, and of course he's an institution not only here in Texas but in the U.S. and probably worldwide. But he's a big advocate for the wild horses.
Yeah, everyone that is celebrities out there working for our wild horses, we're very grateful for that. We're working with Brandy Cyrus, Jessica Springsteen, and a couple other, Caitlin Carter, some really great people that are really lending their voice to this movement and making a difference, because that's what it really takes. It takes people with influence, people who care, to speak out and let everyone that loves them know about the horses so they can love the horses too.
Oh, absolutely. And they're the ones that are trying to get the information out. Now, let's get into it. Let's get into the BLM. What's great, what I thought was really crazy about it, the reason why they did that law was to protect these horses, right? In 71.
Yeah.
And then when you look what they're doing, it kind of goes against what they were doing. It's mind blowing.
It does. It really is. So the 1971 law had really great intentions. It had really great protections for wild horses. Unfortunately, it's been amended and kind of turned on its head over the years. There's been a concerted effort to weaken these protections by the livestock industry. So, big money, big lobbying, and there's been some amendments like the 2004 Burns Amendment. This actually opens the door for slaughter for our wild horses and burros. It would literally open the gates to livestock auctions for them. So every year we have to fight in Congress to ensure there's a prohibition against slaughtering wild horses and burros. And we've been successful in securing that because the public doesn't want the horses slaughtered. And, members of Congress who care about this issue don't want the horses slaughtered. But it is something that we have to fight for every year, which is crazy because
It's insanity.
yeah, it really is.
Well, I want to let's dig into that a little bit. First of all, to get them for slaughter, which it just baffles my mind. But aside from that, is how they actually gather them.
Yes.
Let's or herd them or whatever you want to do, and let's talk about that.
Yeah, so currently the BLM's management is completely outdated. It's unscientific, and it's just this blunt force approach. So what they do is they round up wild horses using helicopters. So they chase them for potentially miles in extreme heat or extreme cold. Right now, there's a roundup going on, and it's really hot in Wyoming, and we see babies lagging behind, and
Uh,
so far there's been a couple orphan foals. I mean, it's just brutal. And you're separating wild horses from everything that they hold dear, their family and their freedom. And you can hear them like calling for their family, calling for moms for their babies, stallions for their mares. And it's a really brutal and heartbreaking process. And the worst part is it doesn't have to be this way.
well, the crazy thing is, and so you guys listening, I'm gonna, as a lay person, not really knowing much about it other than the videos and stuff I've watched and a little bit of reading is, so they get these helicopters and they go in this, and they, I guess the groups are called bands, but it's a herd when they're all together. But by the way, I learned that on your videos actually. So and then they chase them down, and they make them run really fast, and these things are scared to death.
Mhm.
They were getting injured. I mean, one of those videos, I don't even want to mention it. I mean, it was just heartbreaking. Then they corral them, and these horses are freaking out. They're trying to jump out. You can just see that they're scared to death. And then what they do with them after that, they either they keep them locked into, I guess, a controlled field that they end up can be there forever, or they try to adopt them out, or they send them to, I guess, Mexico and Canada to be slaughtered for meat or something?
So the federal government doesn't directly sell wild horses and burros to slaughter.
Okay.
We'll get into that. But yes, so what happens after they are rounded up is they go into something called short-term holding.
Holding, that's the term I was looking for.
And this is a lot of times this is on private property, so the public can't go see what's going on to how their horses are being treated. And these are overburdened corrals where disease can run rampant. I think 2 years ago, 146 horses died in a 2 to 3 week span because of a disease outbreak. And then horses get injured and they can die. And it's awful to have these wild horses that are used to millions of acres of land to be confined to these really tiny
Right.
pens. And
A prison. It's a prison.
it is, yeah, it is. It's an incarceration of freedom, and so it's really heartbreaking to see. You can see their spirits are absolutely broken in those holding pens. And from there, they have a couple tracks that they can go. They can be adopted out, or they can be sold, or they can go to long term holding where they'll spend the rest of their lives in a pasture. And again, that's on private land. That's taxpayer funded. We're all paying for that. And then the final way that they can go is they can be adopted out through the adoption incentive program. So this program we have exposed as a pipeline to slaughter for hundreds, if not thousands, of wild horses and burros. The AIP Adoption Incentive Program pays individuals $1,000 to adopt a wild unhandled horse or burro. And when this program was announced, we knew it would end in disaster because
People are trying to get money.
Exactly. Anytime you mix animals and money, the animals are going to lose,
Right.
and they're losing. So what we're finding is people are adopting the maximum number of wild horses they can. They are, holding them for the 1 year period that they have to hold them, and then they're sending them directly into slaughter auctions. So there are slaughter auctions across the United States. Wild horse slaughter can't happen in the United States right now because the USDA defunded the inspections of equine slaughter plants. So they have to be exported to Mexico or Canada. So they get sold at auction in the United States, and then they're trucked across the border in the long, long trailer rides.
Again, let's put in perspective. These are been running free on millions of acres, and now they're in a truck being trucked somewhere.
Exactly. And so they get sold at these slaughter auctions, and then they do go to slaughter. And so my work for the last 4 years has been investigating the AIP and exposing its pitfalls, and also coming up with solutions that would still incentivize responsible adoptions. And we've presented those to the BLM, and they unfortunately have not listened to us. They continue to wash their hands of this program, and it's become a mechanism to just get horses out of holding, get horses
To get rid of them.
to get rid of them. Exactly, to get rid of them.
By the way, and I love this term, but I can tell you're a writer. Incarceration of freedom. It's a great way of explaining it. You're a writer. Totally. I caught that. So let's keep going here. So that happens there. The reason why they're thinning the herd down, I guess is a nice way of saying it, is really to give more room for the cattle industry, correct?
Yeah. So there's a lot of pressure from cattle lobby to have their cattle roaming free on our public lands. Cattle grazing is very subsidized on public lands, so it's about $1.35 to graze.
I got that number down because I was gonna get into that because it drives me crazy.
Yeah, $1.35 to graze a cow calf pair, and then it's about $22 to graze on private lands. So
Right.
why would they want to do that? It's completely incentivized. It's completely cheaper for them, and it's not these mom and pop these cattle ranches that you think of like Yellowstone or anything like that. It's big corporations, and
Sure.
it's commercialized livestock grazing on the backs of local farmers and on the backs of the Americans, and really the beef doesn't even feed America.
No.
It's like 3% stays in the United States, but 97% is exported to other countries, so it's not benefiting us.
No, it's just well, it's benefiting the cattle ranchers are making money, and it's money is the thing that always happens. So now let's talk because the government has labeled these horses not wild, but feral because they're invasive and intrusive, to use those terms again. Let's talk about the numbers of cattle versus the numbers of wild horses.
Yeah.
I
There there are millions of cattle out there. I don't have the exact numbers in front of me, but
wrote something down.
you wrote them. Okay, you're prepared. But just as like an example, I'm working we there's a roundup going on in Wyoming right now. AWHC has an observer on the ground there to document what happens during the roundup, and she's texting me pictures of cattle, that are out there, and it's really heartbreaking to see. And we have another roundup about to start on Monday, and our observer there just he went out there to see the burrows because it's a burrow roundup, and he sent me pictures of one burrow surrounded by all these cows, and you're like, oh my gosh, how are these little burrows the problem when they're complete the habitat and the ecosystem and the lands are being completely destroyed by cattle ranching, which by the way, cows are not native to the United States, and they actually do better in the Midwest states where the BLM is housing wild horses in long-term holding. So it just makes no sense at all.
Yeah, I'm gonna use one of your videos where I learned a lot of stuff, but, again, Roundup, let's define Roundup. So when just the brutality of the Roundup, aside from the real reason why they're doing that, it's the helicopters and the what's the term for when they're in that corral put them in their holding cell
Mhm.
and all that. So that's what they're doing. And the crazy thing is, what I read, and I want you to get into it because I saw the video is, they're talking again, intrusive and invasive and eating all the, whatever they can do. But the cattle stay right by the water where horses they travel 20 miles just to get to water. So can you get into that a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. Cattle just damage the springs and damage the fragile ecosystems. They don't when they find water, they don't move off of it, and so they all spend their days grazing around it, grazing it down, trampling the springs, trampling the really fragile water. Whereas wild horses trail in and out, so they'll go graze on our the millions of acres of land and they'll go graze and then they'll come in for water at a specific time, and it's actually a really cool experience. So if anyone's planning a wild horse trip, you should try to come to see them go into water because all the bands come in at the same time, they take turns drinking, and then they go off and they trail off and they go to wherever they want to find food or where they're going to sleep or anything like that. So um they're not the ones destroying the habitat. They're not the ones overgrazing. And it's unfortunate to see them continually scapegoated for this issue that is created by our federal government and that is perpetuated by our federal government.
Yeah, it's so political, it's ridiculous. I mean, when you really think about it, by the way, my dogs always have to interrupt when I'm talking. Matter of fact, I tried a new thing today, gave them chew toys, yeah, but it didn't work. It never works. I think they just want to be on too. Um, but there's a lot of things to get into on this thing because one of the things the cattle now because and by the way, for you guys that are listening, it's in areas that are really arid for the most part. Anyway, they get groundwater or ground, I guess, underground streams that come out is
Mhm.
where the water is, but there's not a ton of growth there for people, scrub growth, I guess, for them to eat. But they eat it all and it's gone. And then the cattle ranchers will bring in hay just so they have it where the horses weren't destroying it all.
Yeah, absolutely. And, one of the arguments that people say is, well, cattle aren't there year round, but the horses are. But they graze cattle during the most sensitive time for
Right.
the earth. So they're destroying new growth. They're not allowing anything to grow back. And they, rip things up from the roots and they're not able to regenerate and the ground's not able to regrow. And then they just come back and trample it again. And it's really unfortunate that it's completely ignoring science, it's completely ignoring logic, and it's just a scapegoating of these horses for to make money.
Make money for the cattle, and what's interesting too is what they were talking about and how the horses the horses and the burros are affecting the ecosystem, and it's actually the complete opposite.
Yes. Yeah, it's really, really there's really great interest research coming out by, Dr. Eric Lundgren, who's a brilliant, ecologist, and he's showing that or he's seeing that, especially in burrow habitats where
That's the cool thing. I really love that.
yeah, it's really, really interesting. So burrows are not native to the United States, but they have evolved here and they've lived here for hundreds of years. And so, what Dr. Lundgren's research is showing is that they're actually like building these or creating these oases
Right.
in desert ecosystems that then native wildlife are coming to, and they're thriving because of those wells. I think one of the things he points to is um, there was a native species, a native fish species, I believe.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then they rounded up all those burrows out of that area, and then the species went extinct in that area.
Yeah.
They were gone, and that just shows the mutual benefit of equines and other wildlife, even if they're not native. And so, labeling them feral and invasive is just it's insulting to the benefits that they bring to our deserts and how they really create oases in these incredible little ecosystems with water, and it's an amazing thing that they can benefit. Yeah.
Well, one of the things that in his video that you don't think about, but it made all the sense in the world, there are these really remote water areas that, from the ground coming up. And if the burrows weren't there eating some of it and creating it, the plants suck all the water out and there's no water.
Yeah.
So they're balancing it out. And then where they have those little paths that go into where these oases are, the water's a lot clearer and clean, where in the other areas where it's overgrown, it's muddy and it's not really drinkable.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. They're building the ecosystem. He calls them ecosystem engineers, which I think is such an incredible way to put it. They're creating life for other life, and I think it's a really amazing thing. And it's really, again, it just shows that the government refuses to listen to science. They refuse to listen to anything else. They refuse to do anything else because it's a money making thing.
Well, the other thing that I liked about his video, his was just so informative, is
Mhm.
there's a word I'd never heard before, predation instead of predators. When it's an animal having a bunch of people being prey to these animals, predation, which I love the word by the way because I didn't know it. One of the great things about doing the podcast, I'm clearly not very smart, but I'm learning a lot all the time, so I can say big words that people are going, "What is that?" I probably pronounce them wrong, but at least I act like I know what I'm talking about. But what he said, because they talked about how the burrows they didn't think they had any predators, but it turns out they do because the mountain lions were coming in and they're actually, again, helping the ecosystem and feeding the natural habitats.
Mhm.
It's pretty crazy.
Yeah, it's amazing, and that's one of the, the solutions that AWHC advocates for is protecting predators. You see that they do prey on burros, they prey on foals and wild horses as well, and so to have a healthy ecosystem, you have to have a healthy predator population.
Right.
And these predators have been killed off for the benefit of the livestock industry. So it's a whole from top down. It's a system that's set up to benefit a few while destroying our wild lands and our wild animals.
It's the way the system is right now is the complete opposite of the way it should be.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
So, I know that let's talk about a little bit other than just the rounding up and the holding things is that based on what I saw and help me, are they moving? I know they're moving slow, but they're now starting to recognize that the fertility programs you guys are doing potentially there. I know they're doing the wrong things. The untested IUD stuff and all that, but are they starting to get it? Are they, I mean, how far, I mean, obviously, the government works at its own pace anyways, especially when there's money behind it. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Absolutely. So the BLM, there's some offices in the BLM that are really great to work with, and we're very ready and willing to collaborate with any part of the BLM that we're able to, because that's how we're going to get change, through collaboration. And we know that.
Right.
And so we come forward to the table. And luckily, the BLM in Utah also came forward to the table. And we have a program going in Cedar Mountain to administer fertility control to the Cedar Mountain wild horses. So this is our second big fertility control program. And it's in the really vast Utah mountains. And it's so beautiful. The Cedar Mountain horses are absolutely incredible. And so we're working and we're collaborating with the agency there to prove that this can work, and this is another way to do this, and it's a better way to do this. And so, yeah, we're making headway in that way, and we again are ready and willing to come to the table to meet with the BLM and to implement some real change. And we're the experts. We run this fertility control program in Virginia, and we're ready to give you our expertise.
So, is there any other areas we haven't covered? I know you've got a schedule, and I can talk for all day on this, by the way. So this is not trying to stop the thing, but is there anything that we've missed that we should get out there? And then I've got a couple other questions for you.
Yeah, I mean, it's wild horse roundup season right now. So the BLM stops rounding up horses to allow mares to give birth, but then they start rounding them up in July. And this is a time where little babies are on the ground, and this is going to be their first wild summer, and it's going to be their last wild summer. And that's really,
God, that's horrible.
really, really heartbreaking. And we see the cost of these roundups on them. 2 years ago, there was a roundup in Twin Peaks, California, where the babies were run so hard that their feet were coming off. And we saw an increase in deaths after the roundup. And so the BLM will round up all these horses, but really, and they'll tout a low death rate, and they'll say only a few died, and all of that. And while that's true, the deaths doesn't end there. We look at the holding facilities, and we file Freedom of Information Act requests to obtain these government records, and we find that the death rates will spike in the 30 days after the roundup. So babies will die from exhaustion.
Sure.
Mares miscarry. The whole system is cruel. The whole system is costly, and the whole system can be changed. And we're advocating for that change.
So, yeah, let's get into costs, because the government is it 137 million a year that they're spending on whatever their crazy programs are doing? Is that the number?
The BLM's budget for this year is 154 million.
154 million. And then when you look at the way the programs you guys are doing, like the fertility thing, what I saw is that they get 3 inoculations the first year, then it's 1 a year after that. By the way, just on a side thing, I know that here's the crazy thing for you guys listening. They identify all the horses, they take pictures for like 3 different things, and they name all the horses, which would be so much fun to name all the horses, but the fact that they can do that and recognize those horses blows my mind.
We have the most incredible team of volunteers on the Virginia Range. They know these horses. They spend all their free time hiking up in the mountains and really getting out there to identify them. And that's really the cornerstone of this program, is that we are able to identify them all. We know who is out there. We know the family bands. And like on like just a horse lover level, it's really cool to be able to see how many foals a mare has and where her babies end up and the stallions, and get to watch all the herd dynamics, and they switch bands, and it's a really cool experience to see. And we've got all of that history documented, which is just amazing. And so, yeah, we identify all the horses, and we keep really, really detailed records on when fertility control was administered and all of that. And it's $30 per dose to dart a horse with fertility control. And that's compared to, I think it's about $5 a day to hold a horse in short-term holding, not to mention the cost of the actual roundup and for life and all of that. And so it's a cost savings thing. It's logical, it's humane, and it will save us, everyone who's paying taxes, it will save us millions of tax dollars.
And, there's the cost of morality too.
Absolutely.
So, but it seems to me that the program you guys have is significantly less than what they're doing with the BLM. Again, we're dealing with the government and them doing the right thing, because there's probably 50 people for every really one person you have, and you guys are more efficient in every way as there is. This is crazy.
Yeah. No, if we can do it with our, incredible team of volunteers and our small nonprofit budget, the BLM can absolutely do it with the federal funds. And I will say we're making headway in Congress. We've got some amazing wild horse champions like Dina Titus, Steve Cohen, and they're advocating for an allocation of funds in the BLM's budget. So $11 million for fertility control. We've secured that language for the last 2 years. Unfortunately, the BLM has not spent all of it.
Of course not.
Of course not, yeah. But we are working for stronger language this year, and we're excited to see what this appropriations process turns out for horses.
Well, I sure hope it does, for many reasons. I mean, it just, again, using the term morality, it just seems immoral what they're doing. Have you guys come up with, like, again, we had 75,000 between burros and horses roughly. Is there a magic number that if you implemented your fertility program across the board and maintained a certain level, is there a number that you guys think is the magic number? Do you have that or not yet?
That's a really hard thing, because it's not necessarily just population numbers.
Uh-huh.
It's kind of a whole revamp of the program. And so how the BLM currently, guesses those numbers, say guesses, or the appropriate management level is what they're called. The National Academy of Sciences said it's not founded in science, and they don't understand, it's not a solid, there's no science behind the allocation of population numbers, but these numbers are they're artificial. And so part of, getting to an actual appropriate management level would be to reevaluate the AMLs, look at the habitats. They haven't been reevaluated for years. Look at the ecological habitats and really understand what is happening on the range right now, and then being able to build a scientific understanding and program around that. So it's not really one number. There has to be resource reallocation, has to be habitat reallocation, and then implementing the fertility control to make sure that the horses stay healthy. And there's not an overpopulation issue. A lot of people are like, why are you using fertility control if there's no overpopulation? But it's just it's a stepping stone to that larger conversation
That makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely.
So for people that are listening, a matter of fact, again, I'm gonna tell your website, but I want you to repeat it too. It's AmericanWildHorse.org. Is you can volunteer.
Yep.
And so let's talk about how people can get involved and get into donations, volunteer, get a hold of your Congress people, all that. Get into all that stuff so people can know how they can help you.
Yeah, absolutely. Please check out our website. Again, it's AmericanWildHorse.org. Follow us on social media. We are Free Wild Horses on Instagram and Twitter, X, I guess X now, and Facebook. And then we have TikTok too, for Free Wild Horses there. So please follow us. That's where we have like the most timely updates. Sign up for our email list. We regularly send actions that you can take for wild horses and burros. And those are really, really important to get people to take action on. And then if you're interested in volunteering, we also have a volunteer program. If you live in Reno, Nevada, and want to document wild horses, we need some documenters out there. So that's photographing wild horses for the database we were just talking about. If you don't live in Reno, but you still want to help, we got you. We've got some great programs to help in the investigations realm, which is where I work sometimes or part of my time. And then we also have a lot of advocacy roles. So we've got a volunteer ambassador program where if you're really, really passionate about legislative change, legislative policy, and wild horses, that's a perfect role for you. There, we're working to get you in front of your Congress member, get you speaking to your community about wild horses, and really starting to spread your influence to your local community and enact change that way. So those are just some of the ways you can get involved. We have a volunteer page on our website. Again, that's AmericanWildHorse.org. And I really hope that you guys reach out to us, and we hope to empower you to be the advocates that, I know you can be, and I know that are so important to this change.
And just to reiterate what I said at the very beginning, and it may be under American Wild Horse Campaign, but there are some amazing videos that it'll blow your mind because one, it's sad and cool at the same time. You'll learn a lot about it. And I highly recommend going there and checking it out and doing whatever you can. On the volunteer thing, if I live in wherever, Alabama, and I want to come out there, can I come out there and help for a day, or is it more, how does that work? Can you do that?
We really would love volunteers that are in the area so they can go out multiple times a week.
Right. Okay.
If you are out of the state of Nevada, but you want to see wild horses, again, please contact us. We can set you up with, a herd management area to go see. We can tell you all the tips and tricks for viewing wild horses. You can see them in pictures and you can see them on Facebook, but there's just absolutely nothing like seeing them in real life and in the wild and just living these like beautiful natural lives. And so I highly recommend, if you're taking a trip out west, go see wild horses. We can help find the right herd for you. We can give you tips and tricks and all of that. So please reach out to us.
And so you can bring kids if you have that too, right?
Yep.
Okay, so for you guys listening, one of the things I always find what's interesting when you talk to people in rescues in different places all over the world, one of the ways to help educate people moving forward is through our kids.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're out in Reno for some kind of vacation or whatever, or in Tahoe, which are right next to Reno, and if you bring your kids, you're going to educate your kids, and maybe somebody like Amelia, who started when she was 5, your kids will do a lemonade stand to help them as well. So that I would recommend that.
Yeah.
I'm a big advocate of letting kids be involved with things.
Well, and the kids, they really ignited the movement back in the 70s. They're the change makers.
Yeah.
So, absolutely.
That's awesome. So last thing, as everybody knows, I tell the silly joke, and for you guys that are cringing, here we go again. But Amelia, I know you have a joke. I have a special one today that I want to tell afterwards, and it's not a great joke, but it's a great story too. So Amelia, do you have a good dad silly animal joke or horse joke for me?
Yeah, I don't know about good, but I do have a joke.
Cool. Bad is good on this show.
Perfect. All right. Why do wild horses never get lost?
Why do wild horses never get lost? I don't know why.
Because they always have their trusty vacation system.
That's awesome. Okay. So here's mine. I gave you a little, I didn't tell you what it was. So for you guys listening, when I was growing up, my very first joke I ever told, and I was about 4 or 5, my parents, my dad's no longer around, but my mom still talks about it. So I go into my parents', I think it was the kitchen, and I vaguely remember, it's a foggy memory, but I remember it. So I was probably 4 or 5. So here's my very first joke I ever told in my life. And again, now you'll know why my jokes are so bad. Who goes to bed with their shoes on?
Who?
A horse.
Oh no, that's a good one.
I swear that is the very first joke in my family, my kids, everybody knows that's my very first joke that I ever did.
Oh, that is a good one. That is
Yeah.
a very
Now you can save it for one of your meetings, and you can say
yeah,
that,
exactly. Yeah, we all tell terrible horse jokes at the start of our
and you
meeting.
can say that guy that tortured me for an hour one day, he told a joke. Now you know how bad it was. Anyways, Amelia, thanks so much for being on. God, I'm so glad you're on for a lot of reasons. One is I got to spend a lot more time learning all about what you guys are doing in the wild horses, and it was just really a pleasure for me to have you on. And I really, really thank you.
Well, thank you so much. This has been really great. I'm very glad that I was able to come have this conversation with you. Thank you.
Well, I'm more than glad. And for everybody else that's out listening, as I always say, thank you so much. If you've got a better joke, please, if you want your kids to tell the joke or you want to be on the show, if you email me at mkyle@forrealpodcast.com, FURREAL podcast.com, I promise you, I would gladly put anybody on versus me having to tell the bad jokes. But most importantly, from the bottom of my heart, I really, really appreciate everybody for listening for real.
For real, 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 for real.
We're supported by Let's Walk, that's here to love your animals like our own.
Austin, Houston, and Denver. Let's Walk is here to love your animals like our own. From daily walks, play, in-house sleepovers, and more. Go to work, out on the town, or take a vacation knowing your pets are in the best hands. This woman-owned small business does it all. Check us out on Instagram at Let's Walk Austin, Houston, and Denver.
That concludes this episode of For Real with your host, Mark Kyle. For previous and future episodes of For Real, listen via all major podcast streaming sites.